Tonight you are exactly where you need to be. You've found your way to a quiet little corner of the night, where the world slows down, the stars begin to whisper, and soft stories drift like moonlight through the dark. I'm so glad you're here. Before we begin tonight's story, I just want to gently ask, if you find comfort in these bedtime moments, it would mean the world if you'd take a second to like this video, subscribe, or even share it with someone else who could use a little peace. Your support helps keep this cozy space glowing night after night. Now settle in, let the day melt away, and let's begin. A long, long while ago, before ever the white men were seen in Senna, there lived a man called Gopani Kufa. One day, as he was out hunting, he came upon a strange sight. An enormous python had caught an antelope and coiled itself around it. The antelope, striking out in despair with its horns, had pinned the python's neck to a tree, and so deeply had its horns sunk in the soft wood that neither creature could get away. "Help!" cried the antelope, "for I was doing no harm, yet I have been caught, and would have been eaten had I not defended myself." "Help me," said the python, "for I am Insato, king of all the reptiles, and will reward you well." Gopani Kufa considered for a moment, then stabbing the antelope with his assegai, he set the python free. "I thank you," said the python. "Come back here with the new moon when I shall have eaten the antelope, and I will reward you as I promised." "Yes," said the dying antelope, "he will reward you, and lo, your reward shall be your own undoing." Gopani Kufa went back to his kraal, and with the new moon he returned again to the spot where he had saved the python. Insato was lying upon the ground, still sleepy from the effects of his huge meal, and when he saw the man he thanked him again and said, "Come with me now to Pita, which is my own country, and I will give you what you will of all my possessions." Gopani Kufa at first was afraid, thinking of what the antelope had said, but finally he consented and followed Insato into the forest. For several days they traveled, and at last they came to a hole leading deep into the earth. It was not very wide, but large enough to admit a man. "Hold on to my tail," said Insato, "and I will go down first, drawing you after me." The man did so, and Insato entered. Down, down, down they went for days, all the while getting deeper and deeper into the earth, until at last the darkness ended and they dropped into a beautiful country. Around them grew short green grass, on which browsed herds of cattle and sheep and goats. In the distance, Gopani Kufa saw a great collection of houses all square, built of stone and very tall, and their roofs were shining with gold and burnished iron. Gopani Kufa turned to Insato, but found in the place of the python a man, strong and handsome, with the great snake's skin wrapped round him for covering, and on his arms and neck were rings of pure gold. The man smiled. "I am in Sato," said he, "but in my own country I take man's shape, even as you see me. For this is Pita, the land over which I am king." He then took Gopani Kufa by the hand and led him towards the town. On the way they passed rivers in which men and women were bathing and fishing and boating, and farther on they came to gardens covered with heavy crops of rice and maize, and many other grains which Gopani Kufa did not even know the name of. And as they passed, the people who were singing at their work in the fields abandoned their labors and saluted Insato with delight, bringing also palm wine and green coconuts for refreshment, as to one returned from a long journey. "These are my children," said Insato, waving his hand towards the people. Gopani Kufa was much astonished at all that he saw, but he said nothing. Presently they came to the town. Everything here, too, was beautiful, and everything that a man might desire he could obtain. Even the grains of dust in the streets were of gold and silver. Insato conducted Gopani Kufa to the palace, and showing him his rooms and the maidens who would wait upon him, told him that they would have a great feast that night, and on the morrow he might name his choice of the riches of Pita, and it should be given him. Then he was away. Now Gopani Kufa had a wasp called Zengimizi. Zengimizi was not an ordinary wasp, for the spirit of the father of Gopani Kufa had entered it, so that it was exceedingly wise. In times of doubt, Gopani Kufa always consulted the wasp as to what had better be done. So on this occasion he took it out of the little rush basket in which he carried it, saying, "Zengimizi, what gift shall I ask of Insato tomorrow when he would know the reward he shall bestow on me for saving his life?" "Biz-ziz," hummed Zengimizi, "ask him for Sipao the mirror." And it flew back into its basket. Gopani Kufa was astonished at this answer, but knowing that the words of Zengimizi were true words, he determined to make the request. So that night they feasted, and on the morrow Insato came to Gopani Kufa, and giving him greeting joyfully, he said, "Now, O my friend, name your choice amongst my possessions, and you shall have it." "O king," answered Gopani Kufa, "out of all your possessions I will have the mirror, Sipao." The king started. "O friend Gopani Kufa," he said, "ask anything but that. I did not think that you would request that which is most precious to me." "Let me think over it again then, O king," said Gopani Kufa, "and tomorrow I will let you know if I change my mind." But the king was still much troubled, fearing the loss of Sipao, for the mirror had magic powers, so that he who owned it had but to ask and his wish would be fulfilled. To it, Insato owed all that he possessed. As soon as the king left him, Gopani Kufa again took Zengimizi out of his basket. "Zengimizi," he said, "the king seems loath to grant my request for the mirror." Is there not some other thing of equal value for which I might ask?" And the wasp answered, "There is nothing in the world, O Gopani Kufa, which is of such value as this mirror, for it is a wishing mirror, and accomplishes the desires of him who owns it. If the king hesitates, go to him the next day, and the day after, and in the end he will bestow the mirror upon you, for you saved his life." And it was even so. For 3 days, Gopani Kufa returned the same answer to the king, and at last, with tears in his eyes, Insato gave him the mirror, which was of polished iron, saying, "Take Sipao then, O Gopani Kufa, and may thy wishes come true. Go back now to thine own country. Sipao will show you the way." Gopani Kufa was greatly rejoiced, and taking farewell of the king, said to the mirror, "Sipao, Sipao, I wish to be back upon the earth again." Instantly he found himself standing upon the upper earth, but not knowing the spot, he said again to the mirror, "Sipao, Sipao, I want the path to my own kraal." And behold, right before him lay the path. When he arrived home, he found his wife and daughter mourning for him, for they thought that he had been eaten by lions. But he comforted them, saying that while following a wounded antelope he had missed his way and had wandered for a long time before he had found the path again. That night he asked Zengi Misi, in whom sat the spirit of his father, what he had better ask Sipao for next. "Busy," said the wasp, "would you not like to be as great a chief as Insato?" And Gopani Kufa smiled and took the mirror and said to it, "Sipao, Sipao, I want a town as great as that of Insato, the king of Pita, and I wish to be chief over it." Then all along the banks of the Zambezi River, which flowed nearby, sprang up streets of stone buildings, and their roofs shone with gold and burnished iron like those in Pita. And in the streets men and women were walking, and young boys were driving out the sheep and cattle to pasture. And from the river came shouts and laughter from the young men and maidens who had launched their canoes and were fishing. And when the people of the new town beheld Gopani Kufa, they rejoiced greatly and hailed him as chief. Gopani Kufa was now as powerful as Insato, the king of the reptiles, had been, and he and his family moved into the palace that stood high above the other buildings, right in the middle of the town. His wife was too astonished at all these wonders to ask any questions, but his daughter Shasasa kept begging him to tell her how he had suddenly become so great. So at last he revealed the whole secret, and even entrusted Sipao the mirror to her care, saying, "It will be safer with you, my daughter, for you dwell apart, whereas men come to consult me on affairs of state, and the mirror might be stolen." Then Shasasa took the magic mirror and hid it beneath her pillow. And after that, for many years, Gopani Kufa ruled his people both well and wisely, so that all men loved him, and never once did he need to ask Sipao to grant him a wish. Now it happened that after many years, when the hair of Gopani Kufa was turning gray with age, there came white men to that country, Up the Zambezi they came, and they fought long and fiercely with Gopani Kufa. But because of the power of the magic mirror, he beat them, and they fled to the seacoast. Chief among them was one Ray, a man of much cunning, who sought to discover whence sprang Gopani Kufa's power. So one day he called to him a trusty servant named Butu and said, "Go you to the town and find out for me what is the secret of its greatness." And Butu, dressing himself in rags, set out, and when he came to Gopani Kufa's town, he asked for the chief, and the people took him into the presence of Gopani Kufa. When the white man saw him, he humbled himself and said, "O chief, take pity on me, for I have no home. When Ray marched against you, I alone stood apart, for I knew that all the strength of the Zambezi lay in your hands. And because I would not fight against you, he turned me forth into the forest to starve." And Gopani Kufa believed the white man's story, and he took him in and feasted him, and gave him a house. In this way the end came, for the heart of Shasasa, the daughter of Gopani Kufa, went forth to Butu the traitor, and from her he learnt the secret of the magic mirror. One night when all the town slept, he felt beneath her pillow, and finding the mirror, he stole it and fled back with it to Ray, the chief of the white men. So it befell that one day, as Gopani Kufa was gazing up at the river from a window of the palace, he again saw the war canoes of the white men, and at the sight his spirit misgave him. "Shasasa, my daughter," he cried wildly, "go fetch me the mirror, for the white men are at hand." "Woe is me, my father," she sobbed. "The mirror is gone, for I loved Butu the traitor, and he has stolen Sipao from me." Then Gopani Kufa calmed himself, and drew out Zengimizi from its rush basket. "O spirit of my father," he said, "what now shall I do?" "O Gopani Kufa," hummed the wasp, "there is nothing now that can be done, for the words of the antelope which you slew are being fulfilled. Alas, I am an old man. I had forgotten," cried the chief. "The words of the antelope were true words. My reward shall be my undoing. They are being fulfilled." Then the white men fell upon the people of Gopani Kufa, and slew them together with the chief and his daughter Shasasa. And since then all the power of the earth has rested in the hands of the white men, for they have in their possession Sipao, the magic mirror. One time, a Nook became tired of his beautiful life and longed for something new to do. The Nooks have more wonderful powers than any other immortal folk, except, perhaps, the fairies and Ryls. So one would suppose that a Nook who might gain anything he desired by a simple wish could not be otherwise than happy and contented. But such was not the case with Popopo, the Nook we are speaking of. He had lived thousands of years and had enjoyed all the wonders he could think of. Yet life had become as tedious to him now as it might be to one who was unable to gratify a single wish. Finally, by chance, Popopo thought of the earth people who dwell in cities, and so he resolved to visit them and see how they lived. This would surely be fine amusement, and serve to pass away many wearisome hours. Therefore, one morning, after a breakfast so dainty that you could scarcely imagine it, Popopo set out for the earth and at once was in the midst of a big city. His own dwelling was so quiet and peaceful that the roaring noise of the town startled him. His nerves were so shocked that before he had looked around 3 minutes, he decided to give up the adventure and instantly returned home. This satisfied for a time his desire to visit the earth cities, but soon the monotony of his existence again made him restless and gave him another thought. At night the people slept, and the cities would be quiet. He would visit them at night, so at the proper time Popopo transported himself in a jiffy to a great city, where he began wandering about the streets. Everyone was in bed. No wagons rattled along the pavements. No throngs of busy men shouted and hallooed. Even the policemen slumbered slyly, and there happened to be no prowling thieves abroad. His nerves being soothed by the stillness, Popopo began to enjoy himself. He entered many of the houses and examined their rooms with much curiosity. Locks and bolts made no difference to a nook, and he saw as well in darkness as in daylight. After a time he strolled into the business portion of the city. Stores are unknown among the immortals, who have no need of money or of barter and exchange. So Popopo was greatly interested by the novel sight of so many collections of goods and merchandise. During his wanderings he entered a millinery shop and was surprised to see within a large glass case a great number of women's hats, each bearing in one position or another a stuffed bird. Indeed, some of the most elaborate hats had 2 or 3 birds upon them. Now knooks are the especial guardians of birds, and love them dearly. To see so many of his little friends shut up in a glass case annoyed and grieved Popopo, who had no idea they had purposely been placed upon the hats by the milliner. So he slid back one of the doors of the case, gave the little chirruping whistle of the knooks that all birds know well, and called, "Come, friends, the door is open. Fly out." Popopo did not know the birds were stuffed, but stuffed or not, every bird is bound to obey a knook's whistle and a knook's call. So they left the hats, flew out of the case, and began fluttering about the room. "Poor dears," said the kind-hearted knook, "you long to be in the fields and forests again." Then he opened the outer door for them and cried, "Off with you! Fly away, my beauties, and be happy again." The astonished birds at once obeyed, and when they had soared away into the night air, the knook closed the door and continued his wandering through the streets. By dawn he saw many interesting sights, but day broke before he had finished the city, and he resolved to come the next evening a few hours earlier. As soon as it was dark the following day, he came again to the city, and on passing the millinery shop noticed a light within. Entering, he found two women, one of whom leaned her head upon the table and sobbed bitterly, while the other strove to comfort her. Of course, Popopo was invisible to mortal eyes, so he stood by and listened to their conversation. "Cheer up, sister," said one. "Even though your pretty birds have all been stolen, the hats themselves remain." "Alas!" cried the other, who was the milliner. "No one will buy my hats partly trimmed, for the fashion is to wear birds upon them, and if I cannot sell my goods, I shall be utterly ruined." Then she renewed her sobbing, and the Knook stole away, feeling a little ashamed to realize that in his love for the birds he had unconsciously wronged one of the earth people and made her unhappy. This thought brought him back to the millinery shop later in the night, when the two women had gone home. He wanted in some way to replace the birds upon the hats, that the poor woman might be happy again. So he searched until he came upon a nearby cellar full of little gray mice, who lived quite undisturbed and gained a livelihood by gnawing through the walls into neighboring houses and stealing food from the pantries. "Here are just the creatures," thought Popopo, "to place upon the woman's hats. Their fur is almost as soft as the plumage of the birds, and it strikes me the mice are remarkably pretty and graceful animals. Moreover, they now pass their lives in stealing, and were they obliged to remain always upon women's hats, their morals would be much improved." So he exercised a charm that drew all the mice from the cellar and placed them upon the hats in the glass case, where they occupied the places the birds had vacated and looked very becoming, at least in the eyes of the unworldly Knook. To prevent their running about and leaving the hats, Popopo rendered them motionless, and then he was so pleased with his work that he decided to remain in the shop and witness the delight of the milliner when she saw how daintily her hats were now trimmed. She came in the early morning, accompanied by her sister, and her face wore a sad and resigned expression. After sweeping and dusting the shop and drawing the blinds, she opened the glass case and took out a hat. But when she saw a tiny gray mouse nestling among the ribbons and laces, she gave a loud shriek, and dropping the hat, sprang with one bound to the top of the table. The sister, knowing the shriek to be one of fear, leaped upon a chair and exclaimed, "What is it? Oh, what is it?" "A mouse!" gasped the milliner, trembling with terror. Popopo, seeing this commotion, now realized that mice are especially disagreeable to human beings, and that he had made a grave mistake in placing them upon the hats. So he gave a low whistle of command that was heard only by the mice. Instantly they all jumped from the hats, dashed out the open door of the glass case, and scampered away to their cellar. But this action so frightened the milliner and her sister that after giving several loud screams they fell upon their backs on the floor and fainted away. Popopo was a kind-hearted Knook, but on witnessing all this misery caused by his own ignorance of the ways of humans, he straightway wished himself at home, and so left the poor women to recover as best they could. Yet he could not escape a sad feeling of responsibility, and after thinking upon the matter, he decided that since he had caused the milliner's unhappiness by freeing the birds, he could set the matter right by restoring them to the glass case. He loved the birds, and disliked to condemn them to slavery again, but that seemed the only way to end the trouble. So he set off to find the birds. They had flown a long distance, but it was nothing to Popopo to reach them in a second, and he discovered them sitting upon the branches of a big chestnut tree and singing gaily. When they saw the Nook, the birds cried, "Thank you, Popopo. Thank you for setting us free." "Do not thank me," returned the Nook, "for I have come to send you back to the millinery shop." "Why?" demanded a blue jay angrily while the others stopped their songs. "Because I find the woman considers you her property, and your loss has caused her much unhappiness," answered Popopo. "But remember how unhappy we were in her glass case," said a robin redbreast gravely. "And as for being her property, you are a Nook, and the natural guardian of all birds. So you know that nature created us free. To be sure, wicked men shot and stuffed us and sold us to the milliner, but the idea of our being her property is nonsense." Popopo was puzzled. "If I leave you free," he said, "wicked men will shoot you again, and you will be no better off than before." "Pooh!" exclaimed the blue jay. "We cannot be shot now, for we are stuffed. Indeed, 2 men fired several shots at us this morning, but the bullets only ruffled our feathers and buried themselves in our stuffing. We do not fear men now." "Listen," said Popopo sternly, for he felt the birds were getting the best of the argument. "The poor milliner's business will be ruined if I do not return you to her shop. It seems you are necessary to trim the hats properly. It is the fashion for women to wear birds upon their headgear, so the poor milliner's wares, although beautified by lace and ribbons, are worthless unless you are perched upon them." "Fashions," said a blackbird solemnly, "are made by men. What law is there among birds or Nooks that requires us to be the slaves of fashion?" "What have we to do with fashions anyway?" screamed a linnet. "If it were the fashion to wear Nooks perched upon women's hats, would you be contented to stay there? Answer me, Popopo." But Popopo was in despair. He could not wrong the birds by sending them back to the milliner, nor did he wish the milliner to suffer by their loss. So he went home to think what could be done. After much meditation, he decided to consult the king of the Nooks, and going at once to his majesty, he told him the whole story. The king frowned. "This should teach you the folly of interfering with earth people," he said. "But since you have caused all this trouble, it is your duty to remedy it. Our birds cannot be enslaved, that is certain. Therefore you must have the fashions changed, so it will no longer be stylish for women to wear birds upon their hats." How shall I do that? Asked Popopo. Easily enough. Fashions often change among the earth people who tire quickly of any one thing. When they read in their newspapers and magazines that the style is so and so, they never question the matter, but at once obey the mandate of fashion. So you must visit the newspapers and magazines and enchant the types. Enchant the types, echoed Popopo in wonder. Just so. Make them read that it is no longer the fashion to wear birds upon hats. That will afford relief to your poor milliner and at the same time set free thousands of our darling birds who have been so cruelly used. Popopo thanked the wise king and followed his advice. The office of every newspaper and magazine in the city was visited by the Knook, and then he went to other cities, until there was not a publication in the land that had not a new fashion note in its pages. Sometimes Popopo enchanted the types, so that whoever read the print would see only what the Knook wished them to. Sometimes he called upon the busy editors and befuddled their brains until they wrote exactly what he wanted them to. Mortals seldom know how greatly they are influenced by fairies, nooks, and ryls, who often put thoughts into their heads that only the wise little immortals could have conceived. The following morning, when the poor milliner looked over her newspaper, she was overjoyed to read that no woman could now wear a bird upon her hat and be in style, for the newest fashion required only ribbons and laces. Popopo after this found much enjoyment in visiting every millinery shop he could find and giving new life to the stuffed birds which were carelessly tossed aside as useless. And they flew to the fields and forests with songs of thanks to the good Knook who had rescued them. Sometimes a hunter fires his gun at a bird and then wonders why he did not hit it. But having read this story, you will understand that the bird must have been a stuffed one from some millinery shop, which cannot, of course, be killed by a gun. On one of the upper branches of the Congo River lived an ancient and aristocratic family of hippopotamuses, which boasted a pedigree dating back beyond the days of Noah, beyond the existence of mankind, far into the dim ages when the world was new. They had always lived upon the banks of this same river, so that every curve and sweep of its waters, every pit and shallow of its bed, every rock and stump and wallow upon its bank was as familiar to them as their own mothers. And they are living there yet, I suppose. Not long ago the queen of this tribe of hippopotamuses had a child which she named Kio, because it was so fat and round. Still, that you may not be misled, I will say that in the hippopotamus language, Kio, properly translated, means fat and lazy, instead of fat and round. However, no one called the queen's attention to this error, because her tusks were monstrous long and sharp, and she thought Kio the sweetest baby in the world. He was, indeed, all right for a hippopotamus. He rolled and played in the soft mud of the river bank, and waddled inland to nibble the leaves of the wild cabbage that grew there, and was happy and contented from morning till night. And he was the jolliest hippopotamus that ancient family had ever known. His little red eyes were forever twinkling with fun, and he laughed his merry laugh on all occasions, whether there was anything to laugh at or not. Therefore the black people who dwelt in that region called him Ippy, the jolly one, although they dared not come anigh him on account of his fierce mother, and his equally fierce uncles and aunts and cousins who lived in a vast colony upon the river bank. And while these black people who lived in little villages scattered among the trees dared not openly attack the royal family of hippopotamuses, they were amazingly fond of eating hippopotamus meat whenever they could get it. This was no secret to the hippopotamuses, and again, when the blacks managed to catch these animals alive, they had a trick of riding them through the jungles as if they were horses, thus reducing them to a condition of slavery. Therefore, having these things in mind, whenever the tribe of hippopotamuses smelled the oily odor of black people, they were accustomed to charge upon them furiously, and if by chance they overtook one of the enemy, they would rip him with their sharp tusks, or stamp him into the earth with their huge feet. It was continual warfare between the hippopotamuses and the black people. Gooey lived in one of the little villages of the blacks. He was the son of the chief's brother and grandson of the village sorcerer, the latter being an aged man known as the boneless wonder, because he could twist himself into as many coils as a serpent, and had no bones to hinder his bending his flesh into any position. This made him walk in a wobbly fashion, but the black people had great respect for him. Gooey's hut was made of branches of trees stuck together with mud, and his clothing consisted of a grass mat tied around his middle. But his relationship to the chief and the sorcerer gave him a certain dignity, and he was much addicted to solitary thought. Perhaps it was natural that these thoughts frequently turned upon his enemies, the hippopotamuses, and that he should consider many ways of capturing them. Finally, he completed his plans, and set about digging a great pit in the ground, midway between two sharp curves of the river. When the pit was finished, he covered it over with small branches of trees, and strewed earth upon them, smoothing the surface so artfully that no one would suspect there was a big hole underneath. Then Gooey laughed softly to himself and went home to supper. That evening the queen said to Keo, who was growing to be a fine child for his age, "I wish you'd run across the bend and ask your Uncle Nicky to come here. I have found a strange plant, and want him to tell me if it is good to eat." The Jolly One laughed heartily as he started upon his errand, for he felt as important as a boy does when he is sent for the first time to the corner grocery to buy a yeast cake. "Guck, uck, 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 guck, uck, uck, uck," was the way he laughed. And if you think a hippopotamus does not laugh this way, you have but to listen to one, and you will find I am right. He crawled out of the mud where he was wallowing and tramped away through the bushes, and the last his mother heard as she lay half in and half out of the water was his musical "Guk uk uk uk" dying away in the distance. Kia was in such a happy mood that he scarcely noticed where he stepped, so he was much surprised when, in the middle of a laugh, the ground gave way beneath him, and he fell to the bottom of Gooey's deep pit. He was not badly hurt, but had bumped his nose severely as he went down, so he stopped laughing and began to think how he should get out again. Then he found the walls were higher than his head, and that he was a prisoner. So he laughed a little at his own misfortune, and the laughter soothed him to sleep, so that he snored all through the night until daylight came. When Gooey peered over the edge of the pit next morning, he exclaimed, "Why, 'tis Ippy, the jolly one." Keo recognized the scent of a black man and tried to raise his head high enough to bite him, seeing which Gooey spoke in the hippopotamus language which he had learned from his grandfather the sorcerer. "Have peace, little one, you are my captive." "Yes, I will have a piece of your leg if I can reach it," retorted Keo, and then he laughed at his own joke. "Gook uk uk uk!" But Gooey, being a thoughtful black man, went away without further talk, and did not return until the following morning. When he again leaned over the pit, Keo was so weak from hunger that he could hardly laugh at all. "Do you give up?" asked Gooey, "or do you still wish to fight?" "What will happen if I give up?" inquired Keo. The black man scratched his woolly head in perplexity. "It is hard to say, Ippy. You are too young to work, and if I kill you for food I shall lose your tusks, which are not yet grown. Why, oh jolly one, did you fall into my hole? I wanted to catch your mother or one of your uncles." "Guk-uk-uk-uk!" laughed Keo. "You must let me go, after all, black man, for I am of no use to you." "That I will not do," declared Gooey, "unless," he added as an afterthought, "you will make a bargain with me." "Let me hear about the bargain, black one, for I am hungry," said Keo. "I will let you go if you swear by the tusks of your grandfather that you will return to me in a year and a day, and become my prisoner again." The youthful hippopotamus paused to think, for he knew it was a solemn thing to swear by the tusks of his grandfather. But he was exceedingly hungry, and a year and a day seemed a long time off. So he said, with another careless laugh, "Very well. If you will now let me go, I swear by the tusks of my grandfather to return to you in a year and a day and become your prisoner." Gooey was much pleased, for he knew that in a year and a day Keo would be almost full grown. So he began digging away one end of the pit and filling it up with the earth until he had made an incline which would allow the hippopotamus to climb out. Keo was so pleased when he found himself upon the surface of the earth again that he indulged in a merry fit of laughter, after which he said, "Goodbye, Gooey. In a year and a day you will see me again." Then he waddled away toward the river to see his mother and get his breakfast, and Gooey returned to his village. During the months that followed as the black man lay in his hut or hunted in the forest. He heard at times the faraway guk-uk-uk-uk of the laughing hippopotamus, but he only smiled to himself and thought, "A year and a day will soon pass away." Now when Keo returned to his mother safe and well, every member of his tribe was filled with joy, for the Jolly One was a general favorite. But when he told them that in a year and a day he must again become the slave of the black man, they began to wail and weep, and so many were their tears that the river rose several inches. Of course, Keo only laughed at their sorrow, but a great meeting of the tribe was called and the matter discussed seriously. "Having sworn by the tusks of his grandfather," said Uncle Nicky, "he must keep his promise. But it is our duty to try in some way to rescue him from death or a life of slavery." To this all agreed, but no one could think of any method of saving Keo from his fate. So months passed away, during which all the royal hippopotamuses were sad and gloomy, except the Jolly One himself. Finally, but a week of freedom remained to Keo, and his mother, the queen, became so nervous and worried that another meeting of the tribe was called. By this time, the laughing hippopotamus had grown to enormous size and measured nearly 15 feet long and 6 feet high, while his sharp tusks were whiter and harder than those of an elephant. "Unless something is done to save my child," said the mother, "I shall die of grief." Then some of her relations began to make foolish suggestions, but presently Uncle Nep, a wise and very big hippopotamus, said, "We must go to Glinkomok and implore his aid." Then all were silent, for it was a bold thing to face the mighty Glinkomok. But the mother's love was equal to any heroism. "I will myself go to him if Uncle Nep will accompany me," she said quickly. Uncle Nep thoughtfully patted the soft mud with his forefoot and wagged his short tail leisurely from side to side. "We have always been obedient to Glinkomok and shown him great respect," said he. "Therefore I fear no danger in facing him. I will go with you." All the others snorted approval, being very glad they were not called upon to go themselves. So the Queen and Uncle Nep, with Keo swimming between them, set out upon their journey. They swam up the river all that day and all the next, until they came at sundown to a high, rocky wall, beneath which was the cave where the mighty Glinkomok dwelt. This fearful creature was part beast, part man, part fowl, and part fish. It had lived since the world began. Through years of wisdom it had become part sorcerer, part wizard, part magician, and part fairy. Mankind knew it not, but the ancient beasts knew and feared it. The 3 hippopotamuses paused before the cave, with their front feet upon the bank and their bodies in the water, and called in chorus a greeting to Glinkomok. Instantly thereafter the mouth of the cave darkened, and the creature glided silently toward them. The hippopotamuses were afraid to look upon it, and bowed their heads between their legs. "We come, O Glinkomok, to implore your mercy and friendly assistance," began Uncle Nep, and then he told the story of Keo's capture, and how he had promised to return to the black man. "He must keep his promise," said the creature, in a voice that sounded like a sigh. The mother hippopotamus groaned aloud. "But I will prepare him to overcome the black man and to regain his liberty," continued Glinkomok. Keo laughed. "Lift your right paw," commanded Glinkomok. Keo obeyed, and the creature touched it with its long, hairy tongue. Then it held 4 skinny hands over Keo's bowed head and mumbled some words in a language unknown to man or beast or fowl or fish. After this, it spoke again in hippopotamese. "Your skin has now become so tough that no man can hurt you. Your strength is greater than that of 10 elephants. Your foot is so swift that you can distance the wind. Your wit is sharper than the bullhorn. Let the man fear, but drive fear from your own breast forever. For of all your race you are the mightiest." Then the terrible Glinkomok leaned over, and Keo felt its fiery breath scorch him as it whispered some further instructions in his ear. The next moment it glided back into its cave, followed by the loud thanks of the 3 hippopotamuses, who slid into the water and immediately began their journey home. The mother's heart was full of joy. Uncle Nep shivered once or twice as he remembered a glimpse he had caught of Glinkomok. But Keo was as jolly as possible, and not content to swim with his dignified elders, he dived under their bodies, raced all around them, and laughed merrily every inch of the way home. Then all the tribe held high jinks and praised the mighty Glinkomok for befriending their queen's son. And when the day came for the Jolly One to give himself up to the black man, they all kissed him goodbye without a single fear for his safety. Keo went away in good spirits, and they could hear his laughing "Guk, uk, uk, uk," long after he was lost in sight in the jungle. Gooey had counted the days and knew when to expect Keo, but he was astonished at the monstrous size to which his captive had grown, and congratulated himself on the wise bargain he had made. And Keo was so fat that Gooey determined to eat him, that is, all of him he possibly could, and the remainder of the carcass he would trade off to his fellow villagers. So he took a knife and tried to stick it into the hippopotamus, but the skin was so tough the knife was blunted against it. Then he tried other means, but Keo remained unhurt, and now indeed the Jolly One laughed his most gleeful laugh, till all the forest echoed the "guk-guk-guk-guk-guk-guk." And Gooey decided not to kill him, since that was impossible, but to use him for a beast of burden. He mounted upon Keo's back and commanded him to march. So Keo trotted briskly through the village, his little eyes twinkling with merriment. The other blacks were delighted with Gooey's captive, and begged permission to ride upon the Jolly One's back. So Gooey bargained with them for bracelets and shell necklaces and little gold ornaments, until he had acquired quite a heap of trinkets. Then a dozen black men climbed upon Keo's back to enjoy a ride, and the one nearest his nose cried out, "Run, mud dog, run!" And Keo ran. Swift as the wind he strode, away from the village, through the forest and straight up the river bank. The black men howled with fear, the Jolly One roared with laughter, and on they rushed. Then before them, on the opposite side of the river, appeared the black mouth of Glinkomok's cave. Keo dashed into the water, dived to the bottom, and left the black people struggling to swim out. But Glinkomok had heard the laughter of Keo and knew what to do. When the Jolly One rose to the surface and blew the water from his throat, there was no black man to be seen. Keo returned alone to the village, and Gui asked with surprise, "Where are my brothers?" "I do not know," answered Keo. "I took them far away, and they remained where I left them." Gui would have asked more questions then, but another crowd of black men impatiently waited to ride on the back of the laughing hippopotamus. So they paid the price and climbed to their seats, after which the foremost said, "Run, mud wallower, run!" And Keo ran as before and carried them to the mouth of Glinkomok's cave, and returned alone. But now Gui became anxious to know the fate of his fellows, for he was the only black man left in his village. So he mounted the hippopotamus and cried, "Run, river hog, run!" Keo laughed his jolly "Guk-uk-uk-uk" and ran with the speed of the wind. But this time he made straight for the river bank where his own tribe lived. And when he reached it, he waded into the river, dived to the bottom, and left Gui floating in the middle of the stream. The black man began swimming toward the right bank, but there he saw Uncle Nep and half the royal tribe waiting to stamp him into the soft mud. So he turned toward the left bank, and there stood the Queen Mother and Uncle Nicky, red-eyed and angry, waiting to tear him with their tusks. Then Gui uttered loud screams of terror, and spying the Jolly One who swam near him, he cried, "Save me, Keo! Save me, and I will release you from slavery." "That is not enough," laughed Keo. "I will serve you all my life," screamed Gui. "I will do everything you bid me." "Will you return to me in a year and a day and become my captive if I allow you to escape?" asked Keo. "I will, I will, I will," cried Gui. "Swear it by the bones of your grandfather," commanded Keo, remembering that black men have no tusks to swear by. And Gui swore it by the bones of his grandfather. Then Keo swam to the black one, who clambered upon his back again. In this fashion they came to the bank, where Keo told his mother and all the tribe of the bargain he had made with Gui, who was to return in a year and a day and become his slave. Therefore the black man was permitted to depart in peace, and once more the Jolly One lived with his own people and was happy. When a year and a day had passed, Keo began watching for the return of Gui, but he did not come, then or ever afterwards. For the black man had made a bundle of his bracelets and shell necklaces and little gold ornaments, and had traveled many miles into another country, where the ancient and royal tribe of hippopotamuses was unknown. And he set up for a great chief because of his riches, and people bowed down before him. By day he was proud and swaggering, but at night he tumbled and tossed upon his bed and could not sleep. His conscience troubled him, for he had sworn by the bones of his grandfather, and his grandfather had no bones. Not many years ago, there lived on a stony, barren New England farm a man and his wife. They were sober, honest people, working hard from early morning until dark to enable them to secure a scanty living from their poor land. Their house, a small one-storied building, stood upon the side of a steep hill, and the stones lay so thickly about it that scarce anything green could grow from the ground. At the foot of the hill, a quarter of a mile from the house by the winding path, was a small brook, and the woman was obliged to go there for water and to carry it up the hill to the house. This was a tedious task, and with the other hard work that fell to her share had made her gaunt and bent and lean. Yet she never complained, but meekly and faithfully performed her duties, doing the housework, carrying the water, and helping her husband hoe the scanty crop that grew upon the best part of their land. One day, as she walked down the path to the brook, her big shoes scattering the pebbles right and left, she noticed a large beetle lying upon its back and struggling hard with its little legs to turn over, that its feet might again touch the ground. But this it could not accomplish, so the woman, who had a kind heart, reached down and gently turned the beetle with her finger. At once it scampered from the path, and she went on to the brook. The next day, as she came for water, she was surprised to see the beetle again lying upon its back and struggling helplessly to turn. Once more the woman stopped and set him upon his feet, and then, as she stooped over the tiny creature, she heard a small voice say, "Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for saving me." Half frightened at hearing a beetle speak in her own language, the woman started back and exclaimed, "La sakes! Surely you can't talk like humans." Then, recovering from her alarm, she again bent over the beetle, who answered her, "Why shouldn't I talk if I have anything to say?" "'Cause you're a bug," replied the woman. "That is true, and you saved my life, saved me from my enemies, the sparrows. And this is the second time you have come to my assistance, so I owe you a debt of gratitude. Bugs value their lives as much as human beings, and I am a more important creature than you, in your ignorance, may suppose. But tell me, why do you come each day to the brook?" "For water," she answered, staring stupidly down at the talking beetle. "Isn't it hard work?" the creature inquired. "Yes, but there's no water on the hill," said she. "Then dig a well and put a pump in it," replied the beetle. She shook her head. "My man tried it once, but there was no water," she said sadly. "Try it again," commanded the beetle, "and in return for your kindness to me I will make this promise. If you do not get water from the well, you will get that which is more precious to you. I must go now. Do not forget. Dig a well." And then, without pausing to say goodbye, it ran swiftly away and was lost among the stones. The woman returned to the house much perplexed by what the beetle had said, and when her husband came in from his work, she told him the whole story. The poor man thought deeply for a time, and then declared, "Wife, there may be truth in what the bug told you. There must be magic in the world yet, if a beetle can speak. And if there is such a thing as magic, we may get water from the well. The pump I bought to use in the well, which proved to be dry, is now lying in the barn, and the only expense in following the talking bug's advice will be the labor of digging the hole. Labor I am used to, so I will dig the well." Next day he set about it and dug so far down in the ground that he could hardly reach the top to climb out again, but not a drop of water was found. "Perhaps you did not dig deep enough," his wife said when he told her of his failure. So the following day he made a long ladder, which he put into the hole, and then he dug and dug and dug until the top of the ladder barely reached the top of the hole, but still there was no water. When the woman next went to the brook with her pail, she saw the beetle sitting upon a stone beside her path. So she stopped and said, "My husband has dug the well, but there is no water." "Did he put the pump in the well?" asked the beetle. "No," she answered. "Then do as I commanded. Put in the pump, and if you do not get water, I promise you something still more precious." Saying which, the beetle swiftly slid from the stone and disappeared. The woman went back to the house and told her husband what the bug had said. "Well," replied the simple fellow, "there can be no harm in trying." So he got the pump from the barn and placed it in the well, and then he took hold of the handle and began to pump, while his wife stood by to watch what would happen. No water came, but after a few moments a gold piece dropped from the spout of the pump, and then another and another, until several handfuls of gold lay in a little heap upon the ground. The man stopped pumping then, and ran to help his wife gather the gold pieces into her apron, but their hands trembled so greatly through excitement and joy that they could scarcely pick up the sparkling coins. At last she gathered them close to her bosom, and together they ran to the house, where they emptied the precious gold upon the table and counted the pieces. All were stamped with the design of the United States Mint and were worth $5 each. Some were worn and somewhat discolored from use, while others seemed bright and new, as if they had not been much handled. When the value of the pieces was added together, they were found to be worth $300. Suddenly the woman spoke. "Husband," the beetle said truly when he declared we should get something more precious than water from the well. "But run at once and take away the handle from the pump, lest anyone should pass this way and discover our secret." So the man ran to the pump and removed the handle, which he carried to the house and hid underneath the bed. They hardly slept a wink that night, lying awake to think of their good fortune and what they should do with their store of yellow gold. In all their former lives they had never possessed more than a few dollars at a time, and now the cracked teapot was nearly full of gold coins. The following day was Sunday, and they arose early and ran to see if their treasure was safe. There it lay, heaped snugly within the teapot, and they were so willing to feast their eyes upon it that it was long before the man could leave it to build the fire or the woman to cook the breakfast. While they ate their simple meal, the woman said, "We will go to church today and return thanks for the riches that have come to us so suddenly, and I will give the pastor one of the gold pieces." "It is well enough to go to church," replied her husband, "and also to return thanks. But in the night I decided how we will spend all our money, so there will be none left for the pastor." "We can pump more," said the woman. "Perhaps, and perhaps not," he answered cautiously. "What we have we can depend upon, but whether or not there be more in the well I cannot say." "Then go and find out," she returned, "for I am anxious to give something to the pastor, who is a poor man and deserving." So the man got the pump handle from beneath the bed, and going to the pump, fitted it in place. Then he set a large wooden bucket under the spout and began to pump. To their joy, the gold pieces soon began flowing into the pail, and seeing it about to run over the brim, the woman brought another pail. But now the stream suddenly stopped, and the man said cheerfully, "That is enough for today, good wife. We have added greatly to our treasure, and the parson shall have his gold piece. Indeed, I think I shall also put a coin into the contribution box." Then, because the teapot would hold no more gold, the farmer emptied the pail into the wood box, covering the money with dried leaves and twigs, that no one might suspect what lay underneath. Afterward they dressed themselves in their best clothing and started for the church, each taking a bright gold piece from the teapot as a gift to the pastor. Over the hill and down into the valley beyond they walked, feeling so gay and light-hearted that they did not mind the distance at all. At last they came to the little country church and entered just as the services began. Being proud of their wealth and of the gifts they had brought for the pastor, they could scarcely wait for the moment when the deacon passed the contribution box. But at last the time came, and the farmer held his hand high over the box and dropped the gold piece so that all the congregation could see what he had given. The woman did likewise, feeling important and happy at being able to give the good parson so much. The parson, watching from the pulpit, saw the gold drop into the box, and could hardly believe that his eyes did not deceive him. However, when the box was laid upon his desk, there were the 2 gold pieces, and he was so surprised that he nearly forgot his sermon. When the people were leaving the church at the close of the services, the good man stopped the farmer and his wife and asked, "Where did you get so much gold?" The woman gladly told him how she had rescued the beetle, and how, in return, they had been rewarded with the wonderful pump. The pastor listened to it all gravely, and when the story was finished, he said, "According to tradition, strange things happened in this world ages ago. And now I find that strange things may also happen today. For by your tale you have found a beetle that can speak and also has power to bestow upon you great wealth." Then he looked carefully at the gold pieces and continued, "Either this money is fairy gold or it is genuine metal, stamped at the mint of the United States government. If it is fairy gold, it will disappear within 24 hours, and will therefore do no one any good. If it is real money, then your beetle must have robbed someone of the gold and placed it in your well. For all money belongs to someone, and if you have not earned it honestly, but have come by it in the mysterious way you mention, it was surely taken from the persons who owned it without their consent. Where else could real money come from?" The farmer and his wife were confused by this statement and looked guiltily at each other, for they were honest people and wished to wrong no one. "Then you think the beetle stole the money?" asked the woman. "By his magic powers he probably took it from its rightful owners. Even bugs which can speak have no consciences and cannot tell the difference between right and wrong. With a desire to reward you for your kindness, the beetle took from its lawful possessors the money you pumped from the well. Perhaps it really is fairy gold," suggested the man. "If so, we must go to the town and spend the money before it disappears." "That would be wrong," answered the pastor, "for then the merchants would have neither money nor goods. To give them fairy gold would be to rob them." "What then shall we do?" asked the poor woman, wringing her hands with grief and disappointment. "Go home and wait until tomorrow. If the gold is then in your possession, it is real money and not fairy gold. But if it is real money, you must try to restore it to its rightful owners. Take also these pieces which you have given me, for I cannot accept gold that is not honestly come by." Sadly, the poor people returned to their home, being greatly disturbed by what they had heard. Another sleepless night was passed, and on Monday morning they arose at daylight and ran to see if the gold was still visible. "It is real money after all," cried the man, "for not a single piece has disappeared." When the woman went to the brook that day, she looked for the beetle, and sure enough, there he sat upon the flat stone. "Are you happy now?" asked the beetle, as the woman paused before him. "We are very unhappy," she answered. "For, although you have given us much gold, our good parson says it surely belongs to someone else, and was stolen by you to reward us." "Your parson may be a good man," returned the beetle with some indignation, "but he certainly is not overwise. Nevertheless, if you do not want the gold, I can take it from you as easily as I gave it." "But we do want it," cried the woman fearfully. "That is," she added, "if it is honestly come by." "It is not stolen," replied the beetle sulkily, "and now belongs to no one but yourselves. When you saved my life, I thought how I might reward you, and knowing you to be poor, I decided gold would make you happier than anything else. You must know," he continued, "that although I appear so small and insignificant, I am really king of all the insects, and my people obey my slightest wish. Living as they do close to the ground, the insects often come across gold and other pieces of money which have been lost by men and have fallen into cracks or crevasses, or become covered with earth or hidden by grass or weeds. Whenever my people find money in this way, they report the fact to me, but I have always let it lie, because it could be of no possible use to an insect. However, when I decided to give you gold, I knew just where to obtain it without robbing any of your fellow creatures. Thousands of insects were at once sent by me in every direction to bring the pieces of lost gold to this hill. It cost my people several days of hard labor, as you may suppose. But by the time your husband had finished the well, the gold began to arrive from all parts of the country, and during the night my subjects dumped it all into the well, so you may use it with a clear conscience, knowing that you wrong no one." This explanation delighted the woman, and when she returned to the house and reported to her husband what the beetle had said, he also was overjoyed. So they at once took a number of the gold pieces and went to the town to purchase provisions and clothing, and many things of which they had long stood in need. But so proud were they of their newly acquired wealth that they took no pains to conceal it. They wanted everyone to know they had money, and so it was no wonder that when some of the wicked men in the village saw the gold, they longed to possess it themselves. "If they spend this money so freely," whispered one to another, "there must be a great store of gold at their home." "That is true," was the answer. "Let us hasten there before they return and ransack the house." So they left the village and hurried away to the farm on the hill, where they broke down the door and turned everything topsy-turvy until they had discovered the gold in the wood box and the teapot. It did not take them long to make this into bundles, which they slung upon their backs and carried off, and it was probably because they were in a great hurry that they did not stop to put the house in order again. Presently the good woman and her husband came up the hill from the village with their arms full of bundles, and followed by a crowd of small boys who had been hired to help carry the purchases. Then followed others, youngsters and country louts, attracted by the wealth and prodigality of the pair, who from simple curiosity trailed along behind like the tail of a comet and helped swell the concourse into a triumphal procession. Last of all came Guggins, the shopkeeper, carrying with much tenderness a new silk dress which was to be paid for when they reached the house. all the money they had taken to the village having been lavishly expended. The farmer, who had formerly been a modest man, was now so swelled with pride that he tipped the rim of his hat over his left ear and smoked a big cigar that was fast making him ill. His wife strutted along beside him like a peacock, enjoying to the full the homage and respect her wealth had won from those who formerly deigned not to notice her, and glancing from time to time at the admiring procession in the rear. But alas for their newborn pride! When they reached the farmhouse, they found the door broken in, the furniture strewn in all directions, and their treasure stolen to the very last gold piece. The crowd grinned and made slighting remarks of a personal nature, and Guggins, the shopkeeper, demanded in a loud voice the money for the silk dress he had brought. Then the woman whispered to her husband to run and pump some more gold while she kept the crowd quiet, and he obeyed quickly. But after a few moments he returned with a white face to tell her the pump was dry, and not a gold piece could now be coaxed from the spout. The procession marched back to the village, laughing and jeering at the farmer and his wife, who had pretended to be so rich, and some of the boys were naughty enough to throw stones at the house from the top of the hill. Mr. Guggins carried away his dress after severely scolding the woman for deceiving him, and when the couple at last found themselves alone, their pride had turned to humiliation and their joy to bitter grief. Just before sundown, the woman dried her eyes and, having resumed her ordinary attire, went to the brook for water. When she came to the flat stone, she saw the king beetle sitting upon it. "The well is dry," she cried out angrily. "Yes," answered the beetle calmly. "You have pumped from it all the gold my people could find." "But we are now ruined," said the woman, sitting down in the path beginning to weep, "for robbers have stolen from us every penny we possessed." "I'm sorry," returned the beetle, "but it is your own fault. Had you not made so great a show of your wealth, no one would have suspected you possessed a treasure or thought to rob you. As it is, you have merely lost the gold which others have lost before you. It will probably be lost many times more before the world comes to an end." "But what are we to do now?" she asked. "What did you do before I gave you the money?" "We worked from morning till night," said she. "Then work still remains for you," remarked the beetle composedly. "No one will ever try to rob you of that, you may be sure." And he slid from the stone and disappeared for the last time. This story should teach us to accept good fortune with humble hearts and to use it with moderation. For had the farmer and his wife resisted the temptation to display their wealth ostentatiously, they might have retained it to this very day. The king of the polar bears lived among the icebergs in the far north country. He was old and monstrous big. He was wise and friendly to all who knew him. His body was thickly covered with long white hair that glistened like silver under the rays of the midnight sun. His claws were strong and sharp, that he might walk safely over the smooth ice or grasp and tear the fishes and seals upon which he fed. The seals were afraid when he drew near and tried to avoid him, but the gulls, both white and gray, loved him because he left the remnants of his feasts for them to devour. Often his subjects, the polar bears, came to him for advice when ill or in trouble, but they wisely kept away from his hunting grounds, lest they might interfere with his sport and arouse his anger. The wolves, who sometimes came as far north as the icebergs, whispered among themselves that the king of the polar bears was either a magician or under the protection of a powerful fairy, for no earthly thing seemed able to harm him. He never failed to secure plenty of food, and he grew bigger and stronger day by day and year by year. Yet the time came when this monarch of the north met man, and his wisdom failed him. He came out of his cave among the icebergs one day, and saw a boat moving through the strip of water which had been uncovered by the shifting of the summer ice. In the boat were men. The great bear had never seen such creatures before, and therefore advanced toward the boat, sniffing the strange scent with aroused curiosity, and wondering whether he might take them for friends or foes, food or carrion. When the king came near the water's edge, a man stood up in the boat, and with a queer instrument made a loud bang. The polar bear felt a shock. His brain became numb, his thoughts deserted him, his great limbs shook and gave way beneath him, and his body fell heavily upon the hard ice. That was all he remembered for a time. When he awoke, he was smarting with pain on every inch of his huge bulk, for the men had cut away his hide with its glorious white hair and carried it with them to a distant ship. Above him circled thousands of his friends the gulls, wondering if their benefactor were really dead and it was proper to eat him. But when they saw him raise his head and groan and tremble, they knew he still lived. And one of them said to his comrades, "The wolves were right. The king is a great magician, for even men cannot kill him, but he suffers for lack of covering. Let us repay his kindness to us by each giving him as many feathers as we can spare." This idea pleased the gulls. One after another they plucked with their beaks the softest feathers from under their wings, and flying down, dropped them gently upon the body of the king of the polar bears. Then they called to him in a chorus, "Courage, friend! Our feathers are as soft and beautiful as your own shaggy hair. They will guard you from the cold winds and warm you while you sleep. Have courage then, and live." And the king of the polar bears had courage to bear his pain, and lived and was strong again. The feathers grew as they had grown upon the bodies of the birds, and covered him as his own hair had done. Mostly they were pure white in color, but some from the gray gulls gave his majesty a slight mottled appearance. The rest of that summer and all through the 6 months of night, the king left his icy cavern only to fish or catch seals for food. He felt no shame at his feathery covering, but it was still strange to him. and he avoided meeting any of his brother bears. During this period of retirement, he thought much of the men who had harmed him, and remembered the way they had made the great bang, and he decided it was best to keep away from such fierce creatures. Thus he added to his store of wisdom. When the moon fell away from the sky and the sun came to make the icebergs glitter with the gorgeous tintings of the rainbow, 2 of the polar bears arrived at the king's cavern to ask his advice about the hunting season. But when they saw his great body covered with feathers instead of hair, they began to laugh, and one said, "Our mighty king has become a bird. Who ever before heard of a feathered polar bear?" Then the king gave way to wrath. He advanced upon them with deep growls and stately tread, and with one blow of his monstrous paw stretched the mocker lifeless at his feet. The other ran away to his fellows and carried the news of the king's strange appearance. The result was a meeting of all the polar bears upon a broad field of ice, where they talked gravely of the remarkable change that had come upon their monarch. "He is in reality no longer a bear," said one, "nor can he justly be called a bird. But he is half bird and half bear, and so unfitted to remain our king." "Then who shall take his place?" asked another. "He who can fight the bird bear and overcome him," answered an aged member of the group. "Only the strongest is fit to rule our race." There was silence for a time. But at length a great bear moved to the front and said, "I will fight him. Woof, the strongest of our race, and I will be king of the polar bears." The others nodded assent and dispatched a messenger to the king to say he must fight the great Woof and master him or resign his sovereignty. "For a bear with feathers," added the messenger, "is no bear at all, and the king we obey must resemble the rest of us." "I wear feathers because it pleases me," growled the king. "Am I not a great magician? But I will fight nevertheless, and if Woof masters me, he shall be king in my stead." Then he visited his friends, the gulls, who were even then feasting upon the dead bear, and told them of the coming battle. "I shall conquer," he said proudly. "Yet my people are in the right, for only a hairy one like themselves can hope to command their obedience." The queen gull said, "I met an eagle yesterday, which had made its escape from a big city of men, and the eagle told me he had seen a monstrous polar bear skin thrown over the back of a carriage that rolled along the street. That skin must have been yours, O king, and if you wish I will send 100 of my gulls to the city to bring it back to you." "Let them go," said the king gruffly, and the 100 gulls were soon flying rapidly southward. For 3 days they flew straight as an arrow, until they came to scattered houses, to villages, and to cities. Then their search began. The gulls were brave and cunning and wise. Upon the 4th day they reached the great metropolis, and hovered over the streets until a carriage rolled along with a great white bear robe thrown over the back seat. Then the birds swooped down, the whole 100 of them, and seizing the skin in their beaks flew quickly away. They were late. The king's great battle was upon the 7th day, and they must fly swiftly to reach the polar regions by that time. Meanwhile, the bird bear was preparing for his fight. He sharpened his claws in the small crevasses of the ice. He caught a seal and tested his big yellow teeth by crunching its bones between them. And the queen gull set her band to pluming the king bear's feathers until they lay smoothly upon his body. But every day they cast anxious glances into the southern sky, watching for the 100 gulls to bring back the king's own skin. The 7th day came, and all the polar bears in that region gathered around the king's cavern. Among them was Woof, strong and confident of his success. "The bird bear's feathers will fly fast enough when I get my claws upon him," he boasted, and the others laughed and encouraged him. The king was disappointed at not having recovered his skin, but he resolved to fight bravely without it. He advanced from the opening of his cavern with a proud and kingly bearing, and when he faced his enemy, he gave so terrible a growl that Woof's heart stopped beating for a moment, and he began to realize that a fight with the wise and mighty king of his race was no laughing matter. After exchanging 1 or 2 heavy blows with his foe, Woof's courage returned, and he determined to dishearten his adversary by bluster. "Come nearer, bird bear," he cried. "Come nearer that I may pluck your plumage." The defiance filled the king with rage. He ruffled his feathers as a bird does, till he appeared to be twice his actual size. And then he strode forward and struck Woof so powerful a blow that his skull crackled like an eggshell and he fell prone upon the ground. While the assembled bears stood looking with fear and wonder at their fallen champion, the sky became darkened. An 100 gulls flew down from above and dripped upon the king's body a skin covered with pure white hair that glittered in the sun like silver. And behold, the bears saw before them the well-known form of their wise and respected master, and with one accord they bowed their shaggy heads in homage to the mighty king of the polar bears. This story teaches us that true dignity and courage depend not upon outward appearance, but come rather from within. Also that brag and bluster are poor weapons to carry into battle. And now as we come to the end of this session, if you're still awake, I would like you to feel the calm you've created within yourself. You've given your mind and body such a beautiful gift, a moment to simply be. Let that sense of peace stay with you as you move through the rest of your night. If you'd like, you can stay here a little longer.